All right, so just another reminder, as always, we're all doing a wonderful job. We're pretty far apart in this room. You guys are doing a really good job about that. So just to keep those things in mind. And then obviously our giving is still all online. So if you have offering or your tithes to give, you can give either through Venmo or through Zelle. And then that's the way you guys can do offering. Okay, so today our message is faith, forgiveness, and freedom out of Romans 4. So I know last week we had our big ordination service, and so we didn't have EM. We had our combined service. So I wanted to recap really fast where we've been, because otherwise today won't make sense, okay? So 2 weeks ago, who remembers what we did? At the beginning, I showed you the pictures, and you guys moved to each side of the room, right? Depending on what you think is right. Whether it was your apps or notifications or alarms or the way you put on toilet paper, we went into different sides of the room. So the idea is that all of us human beings, we believe in something, okay? So the important question is, what do you believe? And then I showed you the picture of Jesus on the cross, right? And I said, if you had to pick a side that you do believe or you don't believe, because that is how it is. When you see Jesus, when the world sees Jesus, they will either make one of two choices. Either this is the stupidest thing ever and the most foolish thing in the world, or this is the way to have life. There's only going to be two responses. There's nobody in the middle. And so I asked you, where would you land? Where would you go? What do you believe? And that's really important to know what you believe. So in the last 2 weeks since you made that choice, mentally in your mind, if that picture was up here again, where would you go? In the last 2 weeks, how have you lived after you've thought about that? Maybe you forgot about it. You got caught up in life, you got busy in the day-to-day hustle, or maybe it did cross your mind and it kind of helped you realize, oh yeah, okay, I gotta live this way, Or maybe it was something you thought about a lot the last 2 weeks and it started to change the way you live your life. Well, Romans 4, we're going to keep going because Paul, those mirrors, it's the 10 times magnifying mirror, when you look at it and then you see your blackheads super big on the mirror, or those kind of mirrors that zoom in on your face super big. That's what Paul's doing in Romans 4. He's zooming in on the concept of faith. What does it mean? 2 weeks ago, we talked about everybody believes something. Everybody believes in something. You believe in something. All of us. When you look at social media, who's watched The Social Dilemma or whatever that's on Netflix? No one's watched that? Okay. But the idea that all of us, what we see on social media, really truly dictates what you think. Okay. So if you don't know what you believe in, we're just gonna all get caught up in the main tide of whatever the world believes in. So it's important that you know what you believe in. And so Paul is going deeper and deeper into the concept of faith. What do you believe and why do you believe it? And we're going to unpack these 3 words that begin with F: faith, forgiveness, and freedom. So let's go to Romans 4, verse 4 through 5. It says this: when people work, so when you work, you get paid, right? It's not a gift. It's something you've earned. Now, who's ever gotten paid? A real paycheck, not your mom gives you money for something, or you babysit and you get money, but a real paycheck with your name on it. It says JD, and you're woo, money, who has never had a paycheck before? Okay, all right, that's okay. I didn't get my first paycheck until I was 16. I remember when I was 16, I had a friend who worked for a gymnastics gym, and she asked me to want to be one of the teachers, and I was like, okay. And so I remember that first check, a printed check with my name on it. Then it was Stacy Kim. And I was $500. That's nothing, right? In the world of, but I was thinking all of that money is mine. And I was what am I going to do with it? Well, the older you get, the more you realize money comes in, money goes out, right? So fast. And then I remember when I got my first grown-up paycheck when I was working full-time and I had to pay taxes and stuff like that. I was when you get a tax breakdown, you know how sad that feels? Like when you're like, oh, you made this much money, and then because you're single and you live in California, you have to pay like $1 bajillion in taxes. And I'm like, oh, my money is gone. Like, but when you get that paycheck, you feel good. Like, I earned that money, right? Like, if I don't get a paycheck, someone's in trouble because like I deserve that money. But here's the thing. Paul goes further and says, when you work, you get paid. But you and I, before God, when he sees us, when he counts us as righteous, it's not because of what you did. It's because this is the last most important part. We're going to unpack these last few words here. Because of their faith in God who forgives sinners. There's a lot to unpack here. Okay. A lot of Christians, if you ask them, if I ask you, a lot of people believe they deserve to be saved. They're a good person, so when they die, they deserve to go to heaven. If you boil it down, for those people, what do they put their faith in? Is their faith in God that he can save us, or is their faith in themselves? That their faith is what saves them. That's a really important distinction, okay? Is your faith in God to save you, or is your faith in yourself, your own faith, that your faith is what saves you? Okay, think about that. That's really important. Look in Ephesians 2:8. This is a really famous verse. It says, for it is by grace you have been saved through your faith. It's not of yourselves, it's a gift of God. It's not saying it's your faith that saves you. We talk about that a lot as Christians, like, oh, your faith is what saves you. Your faith does not save you. God is the one who saves you. But you have to have faith in God that he will save you. Do you get the idea? Like, this is really important to understand. We are saved by grace, God's free gift to us through our faith. We are not saved by our faith. Because if you're saved by your faith, then you're saving yourself. You're God. Do you get that? Your faith is not what saves you. It is God who saves you. But how we experience that is through our faith. So let's unpack that. The Greek word for grace is charis, or kari, or something like that. I don't know. I looked it up on I don't know how to pronounce it. Okay, but the idea is this. The word for grace is that when someone is wants to do someone a favor and they do something for them that person can never return. So okay, for example, everyone knows this. Everyone in this room has Korean parents, right? Okay, when you go with other Korean family to go eat somewhere, you know what's gonna happen when the paycheck or when the check comes, right? What always happens with Korean parents when the check comes? What do? There's a full-on wrestling match in the restaurant of who's gonna pay, right? Or someone sneak attack goes to the bathroom and then pays, and then they're like, oh, where's the check? Oh, there's already paid. What? And then this whole you're just so embarrassed. You're like, Mom, there's so many people waiting to sit down, and you're just here fighting about the check. Just have the other person pay. It's okay. But that's what all Korean parents do, right? That's universal. That concept of, in our culture as Koreans, it's really hard for us to receive something, right? It's really easy for us to give and to do those things, but it's really hard for us to receive. Or we feel if someone does something for us, I have to give them something back. Now, that's a good part of our culture. It is good. Because if you just always receive and always receive, it's not a good thing either, right? But sometimes that part of our culture, I think, hinders us before God because we think that we have to always earn something. We always have to do something. So this week, I had an example where this happened to me. I was doing this message, and then I had a literal example where someone in our church family, she gave me something that I could never pay her for. And I just felt this message happening in my life, I can't accept this. I just can't do this. And I just kept thinking oh my gosh, this is exactly what the message is about. We can't ever pay back something. We don't want to receive that because we feel we have to give something back, or we didn't earn it, or it goes against our nature. And I think we do that with God. We don't know how to just freely receive. We don't know how to just let God give us that what we need. And so we manipulate it. We make it about our faith. Our faith is what saves us. Yes, you have to have faith, but it's not your faith that saves you. It's God who saves you. Do you get that? There's this super old, I don't even know, do you guys even watch SNL anymore? Like, I don't even know if people do that. It's like my generation kind of thing. Okay, Saturday Night Live. So there's this super old skit. I think it's like, I don't even know who does it. But there's this super old skit that came out around Christmas time. I don't know if it was like Will Ferrell. It was somebody. And he was like dressed up as Santa Claus or whatever. And do you guys know this one? And it's like, they like wrote out like Santa, and they're like Santa or something. I forget the whole skit. But if you change the last 3 letters of Santa around, what do you get? Yeah, the word Satan, okay? You're not doing your mind. Okay, Santa, S-A-N-T-A, S-A-T-A-N. Like if you switch the last 3 letters, you get Satan. So the idea is like, you know, one little tiny switch and you get 2 totally different meanings, right? And that was like poking like jokes on Santa. But the point is, I think a lot of times in our Christian faith, we've done that. We've taken faith and we've switched a few letters around and we've made it about us. It's not faith in our faith. It's faith in our God who saves us. And what is that free gift of God? What is that free gift? Do you know what God's gift to you is? If I ask you, how are you saved? What is God's gift to you? Like when you get a gift, do you open it? Right? You should. Okay, you should open your gift so you know what the gift is. You might open like, oh, I don't want that. But like you still have to open it to figure out what the gift is. I think a lot of people, when they hear about God has a gift for you, they're like, okay, but they have no idea what the gift is. What is the gift of God? In your brain, what do you think it is? What is God's free gift to us in the context of being saved? What is it? Some of you are like, oh shoot, I don't know. I don't know what the gift is. Do you know what God's free gift to us with salvation is? It's forgiveness. It's forgiveness. A God who forgives sinners. What does it look like to be forgiven? What does it look like to experience forgiveness? If I ask most of you that, do you know what that feels like? Do you know what it feels like to be forgiven? I think a lot of people in our culture nowadays know what it feels like to take revenge or to have payback. I mean, like most of the movies, like, you know, all of the like entire Avengers, Marvels, like is all about like payback, like the whole thing, you know, or like everything we see in our world is all about payback and revenge. But we don't really understand what it means to forgive, what it means to let that go, what someone's done to us. When Paul was writing Romans 4, he intentionally used the example from Psalm 32, because who wrote that psalm? David. If there's anybody in the Bible who understands what it means to be forgiven, it's David. He understands, because what did he do? He took someone else's wife, okay? So he didn't just commit adultery or be a homewrecker. We can't really tell, but from the text, we can assume like he probably coerced her. She probably didn't come willingly. Potentially there was like kind of like rape involved. Like that's how we could kind of maybe assume. We don't know for sure. But he's a king. And so what he tells people to do, they just have to obey. But he's abusing his power, right? And so he gets her pregnant, and then he takes her husband is actually his friend. It's not a stranger to him. It's like his best friend. It's like if you have a best friend and you cheat on make your best friend's girlfriend cheat with you, and then you kill your best friend. Like there's so many levels where this is wrong, okay? Uriah was not just a stranger. He was one of David's closest like soldiers. He like brought him home, tried to trick him. That didn't work. So he wrote a note and told him, here, take this back to the army people, the commander. Do you know what the note said? The note said, place Uriah in the worst place of battle, and when the enemy attacks, everybody else fall back and leave him there to die. And he wrote that down and told him to take that. So he made him hand deliver his own death note, okay? David on so many levels did so many things wrong, okay? So then Uriah dies because he made it happen. And then when the news comes back that he's died, he's like, sweet, it worked. Now I can have Bathsheba for my wife. He takes her, and he still doesn't think he's done anything wrong until God literally speaks to one of the prophets and tells him, okay, David needs to get put in line. So you go and you talk to him, okay? And this prophet is super smart. He's like, I'm going to tell a story. And so he tells a story like, once upon a time, there was a little lamb, okay? There was a little lamb. And this shepherd had one little lamb. And then there was his neighboring shepherd had 100 lambs. But this little poor farmer only had one lamb. But that shepherd who had tons of lambs really wanted that one lamb. And so he killed the shepherd and took the lamb. And he's like, what do you think about that story? And David's like, that farmer needs to get put to death. And he's like, that's you. And he was like, like jaw to the ground. And that's the first time he realized, oh my gosh, I did something wrong. And in that moment, you see some of like David's greatest Psalms get written out, where he's like, how can I be forgiven of this? And here we see in Psalm 32, this is one of those Psalms. Verse 3, when I refused to confess my sin, my body wasted away and I groaned all day long. How many of you have ever done anything so awful, you feel so bad about it, that you're like have a physical reaction? Like you're just like sweating, like you're just like your heart, like you feel sick, like your heart, like you just feel like you can't like, you know what I mean? Like where something really bad happens and you just like, you feel it in your body. That's what it's like when you do something like what David did. It's going to affect every part of you. But look in verse 5. He says, finally, I confessed all my sins to you and stopped trying to hide my guilt. He was like, oh, screw this. I'm just going to confess. And you forgave me. All my guilt is gone. When you look in the New Testament and Jesus, what he often did is in the Jewish culture, when you eat with someone, it means you're like one with them. Okay, so like breaking bread together, like it's not a saying, like they literally actually broke a bread together. But so you know how a bread is like one piece of bun, right? And then you break it, it's the idea of like we are one as we eat. Like we are a family. That's like their concept. And so nobody ever invited like bad people from society to eat with them in their home. Nobody ever invited the prostitute. Nobody ever invited those people because that's like a shameful thing to do. But Jesus always sat and ate with the worst people in society. And they would be like, and all the, pastors basically were like, why are you doing that? And Jesus said, look, here's the thing. That person understands what it means to be forgiven for a lot. But you don't understand what it's like to be forgiven because you think you know everything. So who's the person who's going to love me more? The one who's forgiven much or the one who's forgiven little? That's the exact same concept. The more we understand how much we've been forgiven, the more we can love God. I truly believe that our generation, the reason why we feel so out of touch, we're like, oh, I can't feel God's love. I don't know God's love. I don't know that God loves me. I think we should reverse that. No, his love is always there. But you and I, maybe we don't understand or feel God's love because we don't understand how much we need to be forgiven. We don't understand how much we need him. And because we don't understand or we don't think we need to be forgiven, we don't really experience what it's like to be loved by him. Here's the thing. I'm going to tell you a shortcut in life that if you just follow this, you will save yourself a lot of heartache, okay? Here's the thing. This is the shortcut. God always forgives you. Always. God always forgives you when you come to him. He always forgives you. I think a lot of times we equate God with either authority figures like our parents or our teachers or our youth pastors or whatever. We feel like that's how God is like. That because this person couldn't love me or couldn't forgive me or whatever, that God's going to do the same thing. Y'all know that God is God, right? Like those people are not God. Like God is better and bigger than all the people in our world who are good and who are not good. Like God always forgives. You know what I've learned the last, 15 years, whatever it is, since I've given my life to God? When I first gave my life to God, it took me a long time to repent. It took me a long time to confess. Like when I knew I did something wrong, like I just like would ignore it. And my body would I would feel like I'm just like guilty all the time. But you know what I learned? The faster you just tell God, God, I'm sorry, I shouldn't have done that. Like, can you forgive me? Like the faster I do that, the faster I get back on track with God, the faster my heart is free, the faster I don't feel the guilt, the faster my life is easier. The faster you come back to God, the faster life is, okay? That's the shortcut in life. God always forgives. God always forgives. Yes, there are consequences, but he will always forgive. He will always forgive. And that is the power of the gospel. When we are forgiven, we are set free. That's what that means. In the last verse, let's go verse 24 in Romans. It says, God will also count us as right before God if we believe in him, the one who raised Jesus from the dead. You know the cross? Oh, we don't have one here. Okay, the cross, right? Everyone knows what the cross is. Did you guys know that back in the day, early Christians never used the cross as their symbol for Christianity? Why? Because everyone died on the cross. The cross was like an execution, like a death penalty in Rome. Like everyone died on the cross. The cross was not a big deal. Dying on the cross is not a big deal. You know what's a big deal? Coming back to life after dying on the cross. That was a big deal. No one had ever died and come back to life. Guys, the same God who did that powerful work of taking Jesus, dying, and bringing him back to life, that same God has the power to count you as right before God. He has the power to bring you back from spiritual death. Do you hear that? That's the kind of God that we serve and love. So I want to recap. I want to ask you again. What do you put your faith in? Yes, all of us believe in something. So you have to know, what do you believe? Maybe you and I have grown up in the church so long, most of us have been here for so long, that we feel like, oh, my being at church, my being a Christian all my life, that's what's going to save me. Your faith will not save you. Your faith in God is what saves you. We are saved by God's gift of grace. That gift is in our forgiveness when we have faith in him. We have to rightly understand God's grace if we're going to put our faith in it. God always forgives you. Repeat after me. God always forgives me. God always forgives you when you come back to him. And that is the gospel. When you put your faith in God, not in yourself. We put our faith in a God who freely forgives us when we confess our sins to him. When we do that, we can finally live in freedom. Can I have the praise team come up? What is your response today to this message of faith? What have I put my faith in? Maybe I have been putting my faith in myself. My faith in my ability to believe in God. But really, my faith needs to be in God, that he's the one who saves me. What about forgiveness? Can we all stand? What about forgiveness? Have you experienced that forgiveness for yourself? Do you know what it means to be forgiven much, and therefore we love much? Or maybe we haven't experienced that forgiveness, and so we don't really know what that's like. The only way to experience true freedom is being forgiven freely by God, and that takes faith in him to do that for us. We're going to sing this song together. It's called The Stand. I know it's like maybe you don't know it, but it's an older song. But the idea of this song is, it says, what can I say? What can I do? When I know what you've done for me, how can I respond? But give all my life to you. What is your response today? What have you put in your faith in? As we sing this song, I want you just to imagine yourself standing before God. What is your response to him? What have you put your faith in? Can we sing this together? You stood before creation.